had another question about Nicholas. I always come back. I don't know. I found him the most fascinating.
Do you want to date him?
No, I found him the most fascinating character because just how...
I don't know, like, he doesn't even have, like, a true end goal.
Yeah, it's just power. He wants power, and...
just, like, yeah, just off to get it.
We were talking a couple days ago about the scene when Christian dies, and how what was I saying? I messaged Chelsea, and I'm like, do you think Nicholas killed him? Like, was what caused him to die? And we had a really weird discussion about how Nicholas reacted and how he wouldn't have known that like, his reaction, because he's so controlled all the time, and how he's very...
he's very, like... Yeah, he's very,
first time
I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna do this, and this is my plan to get this.
And this is the first time he's just like, well,
I am so screwed right now, what do I do? And that was just, like, an interesting moment.
Yeah.
But
yeah, he thought this was his big success, and things didn't turn out as he hoped. And that's actually one of my favorite scenes in the novel, when he doesn't know what to do next, so he takes a rowboat out onto the bay, and he just rows around for a while. Like, should I leave? Should I go back? What am I going to be able to do? And I try not to read too much into those things for myself. Like, when you have a character who's unsure of what to do, and that person ruminates about a number of different possibilities, it's sometimes a signal that the author doesn't know what to do there.
I didn't get that in any way.
So a lot of times I take those moments out, but I thought the rowboat moment was really important for Nicholas, because he had a scheme for so long, and as you say, he's power hungry and power crazy, and he's going to do just about anything he can, and he likes to plot. And
real well
so he's kind of a classic Renaissance villain, like Iago in Othello, if I dare make such a lofty
No, it's a logical, like, I definitely, just how he's able to manipulate everyone was fascinating, and how I like how Isabel was just like, yeah, I don't like him, and nobody listened to her about it because she's considered crazy. So
yeah, well, and the other ladies are attracted to him because he's handsome and powerful, and largely unattainable, because he doesn't believe in ordinary sex. Like, sex is a way of keeping control over someone. And the danger when you write a character like that is making him wholly unreal and unsympathetic. And he is kind of a sketch of a person. That the way I make villains real for myself is, I think of a past boyfriend or girlfriend, and kind of give the character that face and general appearance and some character traits, and then, like, you have to feel you love all of your characters in order to write about them. And so I can remember the things that I really liked about this person, and then also the reasons why I am not with that person anymore.
yeah.
But I think that's what works best for villains with me. But I do.
Yeah.
I hate to put my favorite characters into dangerous situations and make bad things happen to them, and then I don't want the villains, to get their rewards. But happy endings are always compromises, I think.
And I mean, Nicholas comes pretty close. Like, he's right there.
I love how he kind of like undid himself just by like, hey, this is how this is gonna work. I'm gonna show you, how to be bloodthirsty, and then it just goes the wrong way for him. And I thought that was hilarious. Just how much he dug his own grave.
Yeah.
Absolutely dug his own grave.
Well, I'm glad you see it that way. Yes, there are moments like that, and since it comes at the end, we can't talk about it in this context. But it's hard work to get something like that to work out in a plot, but you don't want the hard work to show.
Yeah.
So that's again with the question I asked my friends when they were reading the manuscript. Did you know this was coming? And it was really a relief to hear, no, it was a surprise. So I hope they weren't lying. I hope you aren't lying. I hope you're not going to go back to your blog and say what perverted, evil, nasty, childhood innocence hating force of destruction I am. Though I am interested in the nature of evil, so I suppose if I were to take on that persona at some time, it might be good for me to learn.
As you said earlier, it definitely is a question that a lot of teenagers are probably trying to work with, like the nature of good and evil and them, like a way to identify themselves. It's just, I find that the teen section, it's afraid to take those questions to their logical conclusion. There's always I think one of the things we talk about a lot is in a relationship and a teen fiction novel is always building up to the first kiss, and that's the equivalent of like sex.
Yeah, but for a lot of people that's just like the beginning, like especially as a teenager, you don't just stop there, right? So when you get to that point, you're kind of like, oh, okay, so now what's supposed to happen? I've got nothing to bounce off of, like this was supposed to be the end goal, and now I'm sitting here with nothing. So it's great to see like authors, especially these days, kind of like branching out and tackling those questions and not coming up with an answer, but like giving people something to work off of.
And not all stories have to be shiny and happy and wonderful. Like,
they're not these days.
No, from what we've come across,
and especially the books that end up in the Prince Award series, PRINTZ. For those of you who are listening in, it's an award series run by the American Library Association, and their mandate is to identify books that have like high literary value, meaning that the language is sophisticated, the ideas are maybe not entirely pleasant, but they're important, and there's a sense of depth of character and choice, and that's a small portion of the market, but I usually try to read all the Prince books for a given year. Ooh, pixelation like crazy. All right. And like the book that won last year's gold medal in the Princes is called Midwinter Blood. And for the first 50 pages, there's no teenaged character. You're reading about adults, and that would have been impossible like 30 years ago because literature for young readers was so narrowly defined. It would have to be aged 13 to maybe 18, and a character would go to college or turn 18 really only if you were following a series, the characters, there was enough interest in this person to take her, usually it was a her, that far. But yeah, the stories were about love, and the quest for love is always a quest for figuring out who you are, like what your sexuality is, what you like in another person. Do you want to be challenged by your sweetheart, lover, whichever, moms, sweethearts, just sweethearts. Or do you want a comfortable caretaking kind of relationship. And I think that there are a lot of books being published now that um, really give you a range of human experience. And I think that the best YA books stand side by side with the best adult books for complexity of theme and character and language. And it's a really good time because, yes, there are still series novels and books being published for sort of a TV crowd, the Gossip Girl books were, or Sweet Valley High, which is getting rebooted.
Is it really? I haven't heard of that in a long time.
I read an article that there's supposed to be some new Sweet Valley Highs coming out, and I don't know if they'll be less sweet now and more.
Yeah, I remember I used to work at a bookstore, and so I remember still shelving those and being like, no one comes in for these yet. They're hanging on that and the Babysitters Club.
Yeah, those were big at the same time, and I think there's been some recent interest in the Babysitters Club again. I think it may be the pendulum swinging away from edginess and back into sweetness, and it's not that there's no place for that. I watch television too. I've been watching Gilmore Girls, which is very well put together, but it's not an extremely challenging show to make sense of. That I do write about television and movies in some critical work too, because they're such a part of our culture and we can't ignore it. And they just the relaxation or the fun of watching people do really elaborately stupid stuff on Survivor is kind of innately satisfying. And sometimes you just want to have a fun read or something fun to watch, and it can be creatively really liberating because the snotty way to say it is that you watch Highlander 2, The Quickening, and you think, oh, I can write a story better than this. But in another way, you're seeing a structure coming out. And you can do that with crafts. Like, I like to paint walls. Just the up and down motion and seeing the color change is great. I make some of my own clothes and curtains and things, and lately I've been rescuing broken jewelry from eBay and gluing rhinestones back in and making it whole again. But there are all these occupations and hobbies or interests where you think your mind might be turning off, but it's also a chance to think about what structure is and narrative and who you are. Like when I watch people shopping, and I have a lot of anxiety around shopping. Like, I don't like to go into stores and have people know that I want something and maybe question my right to have it. And this has been a sort of lifelong thing. But, and yet I like to dress up and go out in vintage clothing. So there's a conundrum.
They're complicated.
Yeah, but there are people who really love to shop, and they're going through all the racks, and maybe they're talking on their cell phones while they do it. But I like to watch some women shopping because you can see them pulling like a shirt off a rack, and to you it might seem like the most basic t-shirt, like, you can mail order it from Target. But this person is really studying it and thinking, am I a woman who would wear this t-shirt? Or do I need that Jones, New York sweater instead? So constantly redefining who we are, even when it seems like we're just doing something frivolous and silly and fun and self-indulgent and also awesome because you get a pretty necklace at the end.
So I guess the next logical question is, are you working on anything else?
Dreaded question.
Yes, the one for which I have to prepare glib answers to protect my innermost soul. It's like, well, when you publish something, it's sort of like ripping out your heart and holding it up to the world while it's still beating and bloody and saying, hey, what do you think of me?
That just makes me think of that scene in Indiana Jones.
That's pretty much how it feels to me, though.
Yeah.
I know lots of people who will take any opportunity to kind of, grab you by the collar and pull you aside and say, I'm working on this really wonderful, sensitive novel about Charlotte Corday and the French Revolution. And yeah. Those are usually the people whose work I don't find as challenging and interesting. Okay, so lengthy preface. Now, how am I going to live up to what I just said? There's one novel I'm revising, which is a ghost story about a marriage. It's set right after World War One, and now after the great experience with the Kingdom, I want to publish only YA stuff because I love that community of readers and other writers. But I'd started this a long time ago, and it's set in the first house that I bought in Richmond, which was built in 1920 on a big avenue with, you have pets too.
Yes. This is Peppa.
Yeah, so I'm kind of doing I wrote that, I had done the research, and I had a severe concussion, so I couldn't read or sleep. My brain got entirely rewired. I still don't like chocolate, and I used to love chocolate. But to kind of escape the pain in my head, I would just put the laptop on my legs, and this was interesting because I was dyslexic, and I would just type all night, part of the story I had thought of. And I used the concussions and the chronic migraines as a way into the spirit world. And also I had a great aunt who was the village psychic in a little town called Gilleleje on the coast of Denmark. And I've always thought Great Aunt Nellie was really interesting. So she's in there as a character. And I'm working on a late medieval semi-prequel to The Kingdom, which kind of takes up a story that Ava might have told. And it's the most purely magical thing that I've ever written, because even though none of my novels are straightforward realism, I usually like to write in some empirically possible explanation for the strange things that are happening. Mm-hmm. But in this one, there's no getting around the fact that a woman from the land mated with a man from the sea, and the main character is their daughter, who is technically half a mermaid, but she lives with the mer people. And I've been figuring out what that world would be like, when she comes to land and gets romantically involved with a wastrel boy she has rescued, and also with his mother, who is a witch on the land, or thinks she's a witch. But I had an interesting time. Mermaids are kind of hot right now, and
I saw that.
And I worry about a glut on the mermaid market. But I'm half Danish. My mother was named after a mermaid, so I have a right to it.
Well, you've sold me.
She's so excited.
As you were explaining, I was making faces. So when I do post this, you'll have to watch it. But
it's really interesting, like, thinking about what a mer person's body would be like, and how it has to change in order to get legs. It's not based on Hans Christian Andersen's Little Mermaid, but of course the comparisons are inevitable. And I think that, since mermaids are the ones with the power, like they're the ones who sit on the rocks and call the sailors to their deaths, it must be a matriarchal society where the females have the power. And then for the main character, there would have to be some kind of moral dilemma about knowing her people survive by doing this, and that there is some long-standing trouble between the land witches and the mermaids who helped bring them to this place. I'm not using Skugehavn, which is how you say the name of the city in the kingdom. And the name means Shadow Harbor. And so far, the town in the novel I'm writing is called Dark Harbor. So there's I'm thinking an earlier moment in their history, and a moment when the land and the sea were in tension. And then mermaids are just interesting and fun.
Well, I'm completely and totally sold.
Oh, yay!
I'm down.
I'll email it to you if nobody else wants it.
Please do. I will market the crap out of this book.
So what was the conference you guys were coming back from?
It was Kanji.
It was Kanji. It was this convention conference in Guelph, an hour away from us, and we were running a writing workshop and a panel on teen fiction. So
it was just like a general nerd convention kind of thing. You get people who are fans of anime, fans of My Little Pony, fans of I don't even know what. But
the best part about it was that we were running this teen fiction panel, and after we talked about the tropes in teen fiction, we had a room, I think about 20 people in this room, and we collectively wrote what we would have thought would be a best-selling teen fiction given the direction of the market. And so that was a lot of fun.
We got some really weird stuff like aliens and just all these conditions that kind of they started off really conventional and then they just turned into this thing that was completely not where you expected a story to go, kind of if you're going along the traditional lines. That was really...
We have it posted somewhere, so...
I'll have to look for that.
Yeah.
I'm still excited. But also the ghost story does... The ghost story also sounds really interesting. Chelsea missed all that because she had to run out. But
we'll watch that section.
Okay, yes. I work on them alternatingly. The mermaid story is one I can do when I have one of the migraines, which have changed my life. They're constant every day. This is actually a kind of good day. I always get worried about setting up appointments for things because lots of times... Yes, what? Can you speak more softly, please? It makes it difficult to be a teacher, with a room of 33 people. But today is a good day. But pain has always been one of my interests. And all my life I was afraid of pointing my head at the ground. Like I never learned to dive into a swimming pool because it seems wrong to, get your head toward concrete. And by God, I was right. You shouldn't do that. My neighbor had neglected and abused his dog until she turned vicious, and I brought my trash out one day and she attacked me. What I remember is running away from her, and my my head ended up on a concrete step. I'm not sure if I passed out, but the next thing I saw was my boyfriend coming toward me to get me up. Virginia has terrible liability laws, and it's changed my life. Maybe it's made me more compassionate. That happened before the kingdom went into, went to the editor, and I think that experience of just the strangeness and the world is unfamiliar, and all my senses are different now. My memory is different. That went into the kingdom and is going into what I'm writing now.
You can see kind of that in the book, the whole like not really understanding your world and how all the characters, everyone has their own perception of what's going on. So you don't have, it's an unreliable narrator thing, because you have all these different people telling you how something is. You don't know who to believe and if you can even believe anyone.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I started to identify with Isabel more than with the other characters, because she wasn't aware of what she was seeing, and she didn't always know what it meant.
I think one of my favorite scenes was when Isabel's talking to Nicholas, and he straight out tells her that she's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, oh, am I crazy? I guess so, maybe.
And
possibly.
From that point, the dreamlike sequence of her with Mitty, like, that was definitely messed with your perceptions of everything. Because at one point I thought Mitty was losing it, too, because how she was playing into Isabel's...
the fantasy.
Yeah.
In a way, it's... it can be a relief to hear, like, well... You're crazy and we all know it. Like, all right, well, now I can do what I want.
now it's out in the open. I don't have to hide it anymore.
Yeah, thank God I don't have to hold on to some sense of normalcy.
And I think that definitely makes her more normal, because she doesn't have to overwork to try and seem... Like, she has more lucid moments from that point on.
Mm-hmm. I like to think so. And, I like to think there's hope for poor Isabel. She started out, she was a young, beautiful 14-year-old bride of this future king, and her father-in-law had a crush on her. And then she ended up having, problems with producing babies, so... there was talk of a divorce, and then she did start having babies, and some lived, some died, some were sick. And I'll answer, well, I know this has probably gone on longer than you guys planned on, but you asked me a question about the oddest piece of research I came across, and it was when I was reading about medical theories, which are one of my hobbies, from even before I became sick. And that the Paracelsus idea that the womb has 7 cells in it, and it was traditional because people didn't usually dissect back then.
Mm-hmm.
It was all theoretical, and it was men writing about women's bodies. So the kind of established model was by Galen in Roman times, who who thought that there were two cells to the womb, two parts of it. And if the sperm landed in one side, you'd get a girl. If it landed in the other side, you had a boy. Nobody bothered to check. Odd. But Paracelsus, who has a very long name, Philippus Augustus Bombastus Paracelsus, who was a German doctor in the mid-1500s, and he also had a very strange philosophy of the cosmos, and tried to peddle a view of the universe that's different from any other presentation we've ever had. But he believed that the uterus had 7 rooms in it. 3 for girls, 3 for boys, and 1 for hermaphrodites. And that really struck me. I thought of it as a sort of roulette wheel where the sperm would go in and spin around and where it lands, are you a winner or do you have a hermaphrodite? And the hermaphrodism has always been really interesting to me. That will come up again sometime, I think. Especially with the new work on gender and sexuality, and how we have learned that doctors have made some decisions for us and our parents that we might not have made based on what we were born with.
Yes.
And then the other really odd piece of research is about the penis again, but not the knobby one. It's the theory of syphilis. There was a doctor around the time of this novel who truly did want to set out to prove that syphilis was not a venereal disease. And to do that, he needed a syphilitic sore, and he needed an uninfected penis. And he used his own, and he cut it open and put some goo from a sore into it and closed it up and bandaged it. And in a couple of months, he got the first chancre or canker, and eventually he died of it. Yes, I use that for a character in the novel, but it's really astonishing what people are willing to do.
To his work.
Yeah, he was so sure he was right, and he was going to change the way we saw this.
I wonder what he felt.
Like, there was no room for doubt in that. There was no little voice in the back of his head that was like, maybe I'm wrong. He was like, no, I am 100% sure.
Imagine being so sure about something.
Oh.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Wow.
And that gesture Chelsea just made, the flat forehead syndrome. I don't. Yeah. That's one of the things I love about historical research, that people just believed a whole lot of stuff that we think is crazy and weird and misguided and self-destructive. But then there's some theories that our culture believes are true, like quantum physics. How do you really prove that? It makes sense for the way we see the world now, and I like reading about it. Like when it was discovered that quarks have mass. Quarks, the very tiniest particle possible, that they do have some kind of mass. It was like this great revelation to a lot of scientists who got very excited. And to me, it was kind of like someone seeing the face of a lost child in a blank billboard, which happened when I was living in San Diego once. There's a child who was missing, and a white billboard sort of looked like it had her face on it, and people were coming from all over to look at it. I love that stuff. I don't know if I really believe in quirks. I read an article asking whether the internet has mass. Because so much, including this conversation, takes place through the ether, and we see colors and motion and ideas. So what would the internet weigh? And the scientist concluded that the internet weighs about as much as a grain of sand. Which is interesting, but it raises another problem. What kind of sand is he using? Like, how there's that really fine sand that's almost like styrofoam and it makes your hair stand on end when you walk on it. And then there's the nice coarse sand from shells and it kind of squeaks when you walk on it. Is it a tiny sand or is it a big sand? He did not answer.
Is it an African swallow or a European swallow?
Exactly. Is it laden or unladen?
I think my last question is, and this is so stereotypical, is there a chance for a sequel? Because I would love to know what happens to the princess who stabs Nicholas.
She's fun.
Because,
let's give that
away. We'll cut that part out.
I think that if people have watched this far into the interview, they've probably read the book. I'm just throwing that out there.
Patience, then you're probably not in it for a plot surprise. This is one of my kind of compulsive things. I do like series books, and right now in one of my college classes, I'm teaching Laura Ingalls Wilder and talking about the master narrative of America. And I am thinking of this mermaid story as a sort of prequel, like it's in the same place. And it's the kind of magic story that Ava might have told. And in fact, it's based on one of those little broken fairy tales that ended up on the editing floor. The sequels make me anxious. The idea of series makes me anxious. Like, I usually want to wait till a TV show because I hate waiting for a week to find out. I mean, there are some shows that I watch weekly like that. In fact, I have to see Project Runway tonight. I'm watching Gilmore Girls well after it ended because it makes me too anxious even to leave it overnight and think, oh, there's more that's happening to Lorelai. She's a mermaid, by the way. So I do keep thinking about all of my characters, even the ones whose deaths I've recorded. I kind of think about what might have happened before or differently. But I think I'm too anxious to write it down. I talk to them sometimes, and maybe someday I will, but you're right. The rest of Beata's story could be told, and there's a character from my first novel, Mirabilis, who kind of vanishes, and I think she has an interesting story, but I'm not sure I'm the person to tell it. And at the same time, I don't like it when writers use characters, from classic works of fiction and change them. I mean, I understand the impulse, and there are some very good books that have come out that way. Um, that if I feel like I have an understanding of a historical figure or a fictional character, I'm sorry. There's a cat rubbing her head against the computer and keeps moving it. So I apologize for the funhouse effect here. But I don't know. Do you want a sequel?
See, I don't know, because leaving it open to interpretation, I like that a lot, because, it can go, every time I read it, I could get something different from it. But at the same time, there's always that, you want to know what happens after. So
it's not so much Ava and Mitty, it's more Beatty.
Yeah. Like, I'd definitely be interested in a sequel, but I don't know if I actually want a sequel. I think it depends on the day. Like, maybe tomorrow I'd be like, no, never. And then the day after, being like, oh, what happens next? I can't decide.
I think you have the same conflicted feeling I do, and I see in the background you have a Gone with the Wind poster.
Oh, yeah. That's
and did you read the sequel that came along later by Alexandra Ripley?
I've never touched it.
Yeah, and then there were good TV movies that continued the story, and even though there's like some lack of closure to the ending of Gone with the Wind, is Rhett really done with Scarlet? We can speculate. I just don't really want to. I mean, I want to have the question. I don't want to have an answer. Yeah, there's a writer, Ellen Gilchrist, who tends to. She hasn't written much lately, but in her heyday, she was writing about a few different families, mostly short stories. I was always very excited when there was a new Ellen Gilchrist book out, and yet I was anxious that I would never complete the lives of these characters the way they should be. I had that feeling with the Golden Compass series, where you have to wait another year before the next one comes out, and you keep thinking about it. And it is very rare that I stop reading a book midway through because I don't like it. And the problem with doing that is that then that unfinished plot stays in my mind, and I think of that book much more than I would have if I had simply finished it.
I'm the same way. If I don't like it, I will still see it through to the bitter end.
See, yeah. I'm weird. If I really like something, I stop before the end. and then I put it down, and then I'm like, I should probably finish that because I should know the ending, but I just never want it to end, so I don't finish it.
I understand that. And there are some books you can pick up and just read a part of, and it satisfies you. I reread a lot. In fact, in my early 20s, I almost exclusively reread. I mean, I read things for school, but for pleasure, I was really into this author named Barbara Pym, who's kind of a cult figure. They're very quiet British novels without much plot, but a lot of subtle humor. And I felt like I was being disloyal if I read some book other than a Barbara Pym for pleasure. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking over at the shelf, and I think there are about 8 of them. And I would just keep reading about them. I had this conviction that I was going to be an old spinster with cats and a small life as a secretary or something. And And it almost came true. I didn't get married till this summer.
Oh, congratulations.
And I certainly have the cats taken care of.
Oh, but no.
But yes, but life becomes bigger. I mean, and her life was bigger than I'm making it sound because she wrote these wonderful novels, and that's an entire world you sink into. I don't really reread my own because I'm afraid of finding things I won't like. I love to reread other people's books and keep seeing new layers. But it annoys me when you're reading a series and a book is so obviously first in the series, cliffhanger, no closure at all for you, and then middle of the trilogy syndrome.
Oh, that's the worst.
Yeah, where it's just filling in space.
Yeah.
Like, please, I wish publishers would just bring the whole thing out at once.
There was this trilogy that came out last year by Jeff Vandermeer, and it was like 4 months apart. First book, 4 months. Second book, 4 months. Third. And it was the best thing ever. I didn't have to wait.
Yeah, that's good timing, because it gives you enough time to digest one book before you move on to the other, and yeah.
You don't forget everything in the middle.
More people should do that.
Then you have, especially when it's a really, really long series and you're reading the most recent book and you're just, I don't remember who these characters are, and you have to go back to the very beginning, and it's just this
it's trek. A process. It's just an absolute process.
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah.
So, do you two basically read everything that comes out, or?
I think we'd have to live a million years to do that. We try and, I don't know, we go through phases, and with the two of us trading books, it's always, somebody's always discovering something new that the other one has to read, and so we'll switch, and then we get into these grooves where we're like, oh, all this dark fantasy is out, right?
Like we just did a run of some really, really dark fantasy books because that's one of the big trends, and
I'm sick of it now.
I'm so sick of it. Today I actually started Consumed by David Cronenberg. He's the Canadian director, and it's amazing to be reading something that's not what we've been reading.
Yeah, and
he's pretty dark.
Oh man, this book, this like,
you know, that's not going to be your Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm palate cleanser.
But it's a different type of dark, I would say, because it's very clinical, and a lot of the dark fantasy that we've been reading has been like Renaissance or medieval, but I find that a lot of the teen fiction fantasy, it's very, I'm still a princess, and disease doesn't exist, and everything's going to be okay in the end because there's always going to be a happy ending.
Yeah, the bittersweet endings have always been my favorite, too. Like, especially, like, the Golden Compass series. Bawled for a week, but I was so happy.
Yeah, I the same reaction.
Yeah. But we try and read everything. Like, we've read biographies, we've read, like, movie memoirs, we've read lots and lots of teen fiction, but all on different ends of the scale.
And we try to drag the other into our specific interests. Like, I really like steampunk, and so I throw steampunk and horror and...
Yeah, and I don't know, we recently traded favorite books, and that's been like a look into each other's psyches, because...
She gave me this, like, modern version of a Victorian novel, 600 pages...
My absolute favorite novel, I found it when I was 13, and it was like my soul in a book, and it's just like this woman's life as she like starts in Newfoundland and like goes to like through Victorian society, but she ends up in like the American West as people are going there, and then she comes back and she ends up like getting involved with like the shipping line, and like marrying into like a lordship kind of thing, and just like her whole life is just like this crazy thing of people running in and out, and
it It was absolutely wonderful, and I kind of hate her for it because you can't buy this book anywhere.
What is it?
It's called The Wayward Tide by, or it's also called Passage Home by Alison McLeay. And apparently it was big in like the 90s when it came out, and I've never met anyone who's ever heard of it.
I'm feeling embarrassed.
No, and then she gave me her favorite book, which was
Well, I didn't give you my favorite because you had recently read it, but I gave her the recent sequel to it, and I don't know how to describe it. It's like
it's very British humor, tongue-in-cheek, but it's about like a necromancer who he tries so hard to be like an awful person, but he just fails every time, and it's very character-driven stuff.
Kind of playing on the old school Universal horror movies kind of deal, and so very different books, but
yeah.
And title, please.
The first book in the series is Johannes Cabal, the Necromancer, and it's by Jonathan L. Howard. And why I really like the series so much is each book is a different genre, so it's not really series-esque. Like, the first book is like a Faustian tale, and the second book, my favorite, is like a Victorian closed room mystery. And the third book is a Lovecraftian thing, and then this one's more old school monster movie. But
yeah.
Wow.
So we read everything.
That would be hard to pull off, but I'm intrigued.
It's done really well.
Yeah.
Every time as I was reading through the series, I thought, okay, this is going to be the one that I'm just going to not like.
And nope, she's been gaga over every one of them. But there's another one for open-ended. Just, you never quite get an answer. Like, everything is kind of like a contained story, but there's always something at the end that's like, oh no, now I have to read the next one because he's left this open.
There's this ongoing, just the reason why the character is the way he is, and he's 4 books, never been explained, and you don't know if it's actually going to come, and it drives you crazy.
It's nuts. But yeah. So
yeah, we try to read as much as possible.
To experience that for myself.
I'm sure you'll love it.
If you read them, definitely get back to us about. And if you find a copy of The Wayward Tide, please tell me, because I'm looking.
Okay. Well, I will put it out into the universe.
Yeah, it's the best way.
Oh boy.
Wow, that was an amazing conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for including me. This has been really great. You're like the readers everybody prays to get.
High five.
Yes, you're doing something right.
Maybe you're keeping all of your criticisms to lambaste me afterwards.
I didn't, when I originally read it, I think I was more shocked than anything.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely, I rewatched our vlog, so when you said that you watched it, that's why I was kind of cringing, because I think at that point we were both very in shock with what we had read. And the more I think about it, it's not as people have built it up to be. I think it's just because it's in the teen section and people are have a certain expectation of what they think teens should be reading.
Mm-hmm.
But no, the second time
paperback is going to be cross-marketed, so it'll be for adults too. But actually, with all of my books, I'm finding that people who write to me, like about Mirabilis, they read it in high school and liked it, and you know, now with the internet, they are contacting me, so I think maybe my readership has skewed young all along. And the thing is, I'm not advocating rape and syphilis. I'm writing about, how to, if I were to say I'm presenting a moral story. It's, for yourself, not define yourself as something awful that's happened to you, and try to feel hope. But I think some people just see, hey, there's rapes and syphilis. What an awful woman that is.
Well, definitely have been pushing this on as many people as possible. Like,
well, good, thank you. And I like that you use the word push.
But we do get a lot of like friends coming for book recommendations, and I'm just like, read this. Take it. So this book has seen
3 or 4 people.
3 or 4 people at this point, but yeah, like I definitely love this book, and I'm definitely excited for mermaids.
Yeah, well, I'm glad. That gives me inspiration to visit with them tonight. But thank you so much for inviting me to talk, and this was really great. I want to talk to you every week about what you're reading.
Well, Google Hangouts are kind of the thing, so this could always happen again, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I'll follow your blog and your YouTube stuff, and thank you so much.
No, thank you. It's been so wonderful to talk to you. You're so insightful.
Well, right back at you, sister. You make me feel very good about myself. Because you're such smart readers. Yeah. I'm gonna walk around feeling really good for a while.
Well, yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you so
much.
Have
a wonderful evening. Enjoy your shows.
We'll talk
yes, Project Runway. I think it's finale. All right. Well,
all right. Bye.
Bye.